is, and it didn't work again, thank you. She is a certified emotional intelligence practitioner and the North American program manager of the latest global network supporting emotional intelligence in the world. Alexis is the author, and she has been seen on Emmy Award-winning show Black Women Own the Conversation on OWN TV, ABC's The Dr. Oz, The Oz Show, as a talk show host on the Peachtree Corners Network, and providing pop culture perspective with the lens on TMZ Live. Aligning her as a transformational life strategist and a small business consultant, she worked with clients internationally, providing coaching and consulting. Aligning with her passions and always she gives back, Aleasa is Biopic Task Force co-chair for PAVE, Promoting Awareness and Victim Empowerment, and a Healing After Trauma from Sexual Violence and Diversity Adversary. Board member for FACT, FAACT, providing outreach for those living with the threatening of food allergies, and founder of grassroots groups, Sisters in the Businesses Network, Gwinnett, and Compassions for, okay, now that got cut off. I apologize, Mark, it got cut off. But ladies and gentlemen, please, Ms. Aleasa Word.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm glad to be here today with everyone. Today, right? So are you all familiar with seeing this? Everybody kind of seen this thing around, right? Do you know the origins of this? Does anybody know the origins of this? So let me tell you a little story about this. So did you know that instead of this just being the little @ sign that you use in your Gmail, this was actually something that was designed back in the 1500s. And that was at a time when they really started talking about amphibian life. And amphibian life, it was such a big conversation about kind of the ecosystems and all these sorts of things like that, that a lot of these big words were just kind of like a little bit too much for everybody to actually manage and navigate. So they started trying to find little acronyms and symbols and things like that to stand for things. So fast forward, here we are in 2024. Well, we don't use it for amphibian life. We use this for Gmail or for Yahoo or for MSN or all these things, right? Okay. Now, that sounded like a really good story, didn't it? And because she read all my little accolades and stuff like that, it sounded like I was telling y'all a story. And you were in the church, so why would I lie in a church? Right? That was a big lie. This has nothing to do with any amphibian in life. Okay? Now, the first documented usage of this was back in the 1500s, but it had nothing to do with that. And the reason I started this story off with that is because I am here today to speak on behalf of PAVE. One of the things that PAVE is really passionate about is helping victims of sexual assault, human trafficking, and domestic violence to heal. But we've got to start working through some prevention strategies. What does this have to do with the @ sign? It doesn't matter if I come to you in a position of authority or if I'm just a random person in the community. If I come to you very polished and seem like I know what I'm talking about and I'm very knowledgeable, you will believe me. And then you are suddenly vulnerable. And once you are vulnerable, I now have the opportunity to take advantage of you. Just like I did just now. I took advantage of, you are some bright people in here. We have the district attorney's office in here. And y'all were just amphibian. I learned something about that amphibian today. But the point of the matter is, when we're thinking about things like sexual assault, human trafficking, domestic violence, or we also call it intimate partner violence at this point, there are some things that happen with people from a trust perspective. And we've got to really start helping people to see that any of us at any given moment could be a victim, or in my thoughts, a survivor. Because see, not everyone who's experienced this wants to be called a victim, by the way. So we have to ask people, do you want to be called a victim? Do you want to be called a survivor? How should I address you? Because you get to decide, because this person took your power away. I don't want to take it any further away from you. So I get to ask you, how do you want to be identified after you've experienced trauma? So in that thinking, let's think about this crucial topic of sexual assault. 1 in 4 girls in the United States is impacted by sexual assault, but 1 in 6 boys are also impacted by that. Think about your communities, your schools, your churches, all the places that you're in, all the children that you see. 1 out of every 4 girls, 1 out of every 6 boys, but that also means that one of those people was also the offender. And we've got to do a better job at helping people to not offend. Just as we've heard about some things about mental health, we have to be willing to be open to talk about mental health. We cannot get offended when someone says, I think little Johnny's having some issues in school, and think it's so personal we don't want to hear that Johnny's having an issue. I don't want to see little Johnny facing the death penalty. So we've got to do something about little Johnny while little Johnny's little, before he becomes big Johnny and it becomes a big problem. 44% of students on college campuses have actually witnessed their friends heading off drunk to a sexual encounter. And what does that speak to? That speaks to consent. Do we know what consent really means? Do we have a full understanding of consent? When was the last time you had a conversation with someone about consent? We don't. Just because someone doesn't say no doesn't mean that they said yes. And just because someone said yes yesterday, this morning, 5 minutes ago, does not mean that it's a yes right now. We have to be willing to have those conversations. We also have to understand that empowering our children with the ability to be straight up, direct, and having conversations with us matters. And these are some awkward moments that we'll sometime have to experience. Speaking of awkward moments, my kids, I thought I was doing the right thing. I'm empowering my kids. Oh, you can speak up. You can say all these different things. You can tell me everything. So one time I asked my son to go upstairs and get my laptop. He was a little younger. And he comes downstairs with it. He says, Mom, I got to tell you something. I said, okay, you can tell me anything. He said, I really want to tell you something. Okay. Every time you ask me to go get something, I feel like, why don't you take your lazy tail upstairs and get it yourself? That was a very awkward moment for me. But talking about sexual assault is also very awkward. But we need to be willing to be open and lean into the awkward conversations with our children, the people in our neighborhoods, the people at our schools, the people at our colleges, the people in the doctor's office. We need to have awkward conversations. We also need to be willing to step up and say something or do something. Now, the bystander effect is a real issue. People become afraid to say or do something in situations. Right? There's diffusion responsibility that happens. The more people are around, the more I'm thinking, you're going to do something or you're going to do something, but I'm standing here and I'm not doing anything because I don't want to be involved in that situation. We've got to be able to learn how to intervene effectively. That might mean intervening later. That might mean having the conversation later. But if you see something, say something, do something. Because it could be you. Oftentimes people don't believe the victim, because we think that we live in a just society. And there's something called the just society theory. And in that, I believe that everything in this society somehow is right. Sometimes things happen. But if I believe that things happen that are this bad, that means it could happen to me. Or if it did happen to me, I'm now going to have to acknowledge it and talk about it. That's one of the reasons people aren't believed, because of this theory. The other thing is we have to think about healing for survivors. There is a need for support in communities, a huge need. We also need to talk about why survivors are mistreated, why they're not believed. Well, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that? We've all heard of fight, flight, freeze, right? But have you heard about the term tonic immobility? That is when something happens to you and your body physically freezes and you cannot move at that moment. So how dare we say that people should do things about something happening to them when we're not in their shoes? So the point of all of this is to say that we need support in communities. We need support of judges. We need support of district attorneys. We need support from you in the community. We need to talk about it in the church. We need to talk about it in our homes. We need to stop talking about, well, y'all know how Uncle Bubba is. Y'all just keep the kids away from him. We can't have those conversations anymore. It's not okay. And when you say no, no is no. When someone says no to you, no is no. When someone is incapacitated, that is no. And we've got to have these conversations early and often with people in our community so that people can feel empowered to say no and to set their boundaries. And at PAVE, we are trying to do our very best to raise additional awareness, not only from a national perspective for people in general, but thinking about even communities of color. Because we know that in various communities, whether it's race, religion, ethnicity, social, economic class, whatever that is, we have different standards sometimes. But the standard should never be where a person is ever compromised with something that is so precious. Your body is yours, and you get to say what happens to it. And no one should ever feel so empowered that they can take that from you. That's my time.
Thank you so much. Again, how would you help? She just brought up point after point after point after scenario after situation that I know one of us, if not all of you guys, have been in. You see, you're going out with your friends, and one's intoxicated, and she meets a nice young man, and you know she shouldn't go with that young man. How would you help? Fight your friend. Get her in the car. Because she'd rather fight you than fight somebody off of her and fight the rest of her life to be strong again. Now comes a good thing.